Hello, it's Anna Hill here with the Farming Today podcast. Today, as President Trump plans to bail out soyabean farmers and China goes to South America for supplies, how will UK animal feed be affected by the turmoil? First, though, all week we're taking a closer look at rural crime. Hare coursing is an illegal sport using dogs to chase and kill hares. For many years, it's been a regular problem in the autumn and winter months, especially in the east of England, where arable fields are frequently damaged by hare coursers filming and betting on dogs while driving across planted fields. In the last 18 months, hare coursing has also become a problem in one South Wales county. In the first 6 months of this year, nearly 80 cases were reported in the Vale of Glamorgan. Marie-Claire Carey-Jones has been to meet a farmer called Lucy. We aren't using her surname because she and other farmers in the area are worried about repeat incidents.
I can show you that recent damage to a new gate that has been totally bashed in by hare coursers trying to actually enter a large 40-50 acre field, which obviously they wanted to actually access this block of land to go coursing. There's a 15-foot gate that now has actually been rammed into continually by a vehicle to the degree that it won't close anymore and is completely bowed. It now isn't stock-proof, so what we've actually had to do is not have stock in this field until we can actually repair it, but also in case they come back, we've now actually put a large tree trunk in its way to actually stop them actually damaging the gate any longer.
And is this the only incident that's happened to you?
No, this is just one of actually many. You know, you wake up in the morning and you've actually got best part of 200 or 300 cattle which are completely mixed up because they've actually rallied around the fields. They go literally straight through the middle of crops. You know, it's happening more and more within this area.
And how does it make you feel?
You actually are not easy in your own home.
Today I'm with a group of farmers in the Vale of Glamorgan who've been impacted by hare coursing. They're meeting, organised by the NFU, to discuss what can be done to deal with the problem.
Hello, I'm John. I live in the Vale of Glamorgan and I farm an arable farm. A few weeks ago, 11 o'clock at night, going to bed, and we happened to notice there was a couple of lights going across the bottom field. And I said to my son, I think it could be hare coursers, so we both went out quick. We noticed something glistening and they'd left a number plate behind. So we presented the police, so they were able to, it was quite a result actually, because they did trace it and they've impounded and crushed the vehicle since.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm a beef and sheep farmer from the Vale of Glamorgan. They break into the farm by either smashing the gates or cutting the locks. They never shut the gate behind them, which when you've got livestock is a massive problem. Our farm joins an A road and a B road, and we've had large bunches of cattle out on the road.
And what impact is this having on you?
It's the stress of not knowing who's on your farm. The biggest impact would be time, because every time they come, they leave a mess. They either damage a gate or they mix bunches of livestock up, which then have to be sorted back into their breeding families or age ranges or whatever we've got them managed in. And, you know, a new gate, 2 posts to hang it on because they've rammed it.
Tom Rees, I'm NFU Cymru County Chair for Glamorgan.
Hare coursing wasn't a major problem in this area until about 18 months, 2 years ago. Why is that?
Well, I think the major reasoning for it is because England have had, the police have cracked down on these people and they've stopped them, they've seized cars, seized dogs, destroyed dogs. So it has driven the criminals across the bridge. You know, we've got easy access with the M4 not far away, that they can get here quite easily, and the effect it's having on farmers in this county is terrible.
I asked South Wales Police about those points raised in that interview, and in a statement they said it has rural crime experts across the force. It went on to say this approach is intelligence and data-led, in line with the communities and geographies we police.
Marie-Claire Carey-Jones reporting. Using insects as animal feed is still a new form of farming. There have been a number of start-ups, and current UK regulations mean protein derived from insects can be used in pet food and to feed farmed fish. Live insects are also allowed to be fed to chickens and pigs. But if insects are being farmed, how should they be looked after? Is their welfare important? Jonathan Birch is Professor of Philosophy and Director of the Jeremy Collar Centre for Animal Sentience at the London School of Economics. I asked him if our attitude to insects is changing.
Even a few years ago, people would often dismiss the whole idea of insects feeling anything like emotions or pain or anything like that. And I think the evidence really has shifted. I've ended up thinking that they're more likely than not to be feeling something like pain or pleasure, because we've seen experiments looking at whether they play and showing bees rolling balls seemingly for fun, flies riding on carousels, and we've seen experiments into the negative side of their lives as well, and we're increasingly seeing fruit flies being used in science as pain models for developing new painkillers. And if we're using them for that, well, there must be something there that makes them such good models.
So if they are sentient, then how do you think they should be treated?
Well, we've got to be thinking of insect farming as fundamentally like any other kind of animal farming, where you've got to be treating the animals with respect, recognising that you have a duty of care towards them, and developing welfare standards. And in fact, I think the industry now accepts that. I think even a few years ago, they were denying that it was like other kinds of animal farming. They weren't seeing the animals as having welfare. But in my view, they've come round. They are now in a process of trying to develop welfare standards.
What would that look like? What do you think? I mean, especially on culling.
Yeah, you need humane slaughter methods, which is difficult because it's such an under-researched area. At the moment, we see a lot of different companies in the industry using very different methods that they've often patented themselves. Some of them are using forms of grinding where the insect is just instantaneously ground up. Others are using forms of steaming. And what we don't have at the moment is any standardization around what actually is the quickest method, what is the most humane method. Industry needs to move towards that.
I mean, there is a natural tendency to dislike insects for some people. Does that skew the way they're seen?
Well, we're very biased, yeah. I think people are very biased toward bees. So when I talk about bees as sentient beings, people love that, and beekeepers have always seen them in that way. We don't recognise that actually what we see in the bees is there in some form in lots of other insects as well, including the ones we don't get on with too well, like flies. And I think all kinds of sentient beings deserve respect, and we need welfare standards in every kind of farming.
The way we treat other farm animals is also under a lot of debate. I mean, should they be free range? Should they be caged? You know, are they allowed to fly? Are they allowed to live a normal life like as an insect would while they're being farmed?
Yeah, I mean, we need to improve welfare standards in every kind of farming, of course. Often a minimum standard for other kinds of farming is the so-called 5 freedoms, things like freedom from pain, freedom from hunger and thirst, and so on, where there's wide agreement that, okay, we do want to do better than that, we want to exceed that, but this is the minimum bar. These are the standards we just got to meet. And, insect farming has come round to that insects deserve the 5 freedoms. They deserve to be fed, they deserve to be free from cruel and unnecessary suffering. And that's a big change that it will have to result in some changes to how the industry does things, but I think it's good that they've begun that process.
Professor Jonathan Birch. Well, insects may be a future source for animal feed, but soyabeans are still the most important livestock protein source for UK farmers, particularly for poultry, pigs and dairy. And since we can't grow soyabeans here due to our climate, we rely heavily on imports, leaving us vulnerable to global price fluctuations. The world market for soyabeans has been hugely disrupted because China, the world's largest buyer of soya for feed, has turned its back on the United States and switched to South America instead. When Donald Trump imposed large tariffs on Chinese imports to the US, China retaliated and placed a 20% tariff on imports of soyabeans from America. Well, now the president says that his administration is preparing to put in place a multi-billion-dollar aid package for American farmers targeting soyabean growers. Ali Renison is director of SEC Newgate Consultancy and a former trade advisor to the government.
This is not the first time that Trump in his presidential administration has had to effectively caveat and counteract the impact of his trade policies by bailing out sort of the farming sector. We saw that in 2019 and 2020, sort of the bailouts totaling about sort of well over sort of $60 billion. So this is not a first for him. And I think that he knows it's interesting. I think the farming sector is still quite loath to criticize him directly, but they are certainly speaking out about kind of what they're seeing in the market and being shut out of China.
This is a multi-billion-pound package, isn't it? And there are rules about what support is allowed under World Trade Organization rules. Would this be considered trade distorting?
Yeah, there's an agreement called the sort of Subsidies and Countervailing Measures Agreement, but also there have been sort of agreements on agriculture to sort of limit export subsidies for the sector, for agricultural industries sort of progressively over the years through the WTO. There are some crisis measures that could potentially be leveraged here, but frankly speaking, you know, the Trump administration doesn't really care that much about kind of what is feasible under the WTO rules. There may be a challenge, of course. Other countries could challenge some of the subsidies. But the sort of the irony of that is that the U.S. is also blocking the sort of dispute settlement mechanism for basically sort of progressing these cases. So effectively, I think the Trump administration probably thinks it can do what it wants here in terms of having to worry about international trade law.
And when we pan out and we look at the global situation for trade in soybeans, how could this affect global trade? Because we know that China is turning to South America, isn't it, to source its soybean?
Yeah, it's interesting that both Argentina and Brazil are kind of the big winners out of this. And the reason I say that there's some irony in that is that the U.S. government also recently announced that it was going to sort of try and help, maybe not bail out, but certainly sort of support the struggling Argentinian government because it's led by a sort of Javier Milei, who has the same sort of economic policies and quite likes Trump, to help them out with sort of shoring up the Argentinian peso. So there is some irony in the fact that the U.S. government may be helping basically a direct competitor, directly or indirectly, in this space.
And the UK buys most of its soy for animal feed from South America, doesn't it? So does China coming into that market, will that make prices go up for us?
It's an interesting question. I think that there's quite a lot of fluidity in the sort of the soybean sort of price market at the moment. I think there is a possibility of that. But in terms of the U.S. is also arguing that it wants to try and expand to other sectors of agriculture besides just the ethanol market, which was contained in the US-UK trade deal. And I could see certainly US farmers and certainly members of Congress pushing President Trump to try and get the UK and other US trading partners to agree to sort of offload some of that at an increased share.
As livestock feed relies so much on soy, what are the longer term implications then of all these trade disputes and the tariffs that are going on?
I think it wreaks havoc on the kind of the predictability of the commodities market in terms of being able to sort of take long-term perspectives and you know, in terms of the way that the contracts are sort of structured. You're going to have to sort of factor in trade sort of uncertainty into those contracts, which becomes quite complicated to actually do with that level of uncertainty.
And what does that mean then? That we have, inflated prices for soy feed? You know, because we're absolutely reliant on importing it. We just don't grow it here, do we?
Exactly. And so I think the possibility of kind of the sort of increase in prices in the short term, at least, you know, and this is sort of one of the arguments about how do you deal with sort of the uncertainty that Trump, not only I think Trump's trade policies are having, but certainly the retaliation are. And one of those question marks is around kind of the predictability of the pricing for things like feed, the grain feed market.
Ali Renison, the director of SEC Newgate Consultancy. That's all from us. I'm Anna Hill. The producer was Beatrice Fenton. Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.